The helicopter's rotors sliced through the desert air with mechanical precision, but something was wrong. Colonel Marcus Webb pressed his headset closer to his ear, straining to hear the transmission crackling through the static. The voice on the other end was calm, almost conversational, discussing weather patterns and fuel calculations with the kind of casual authority that made seasoned pilots nervous. "Control, this is Phantom 77 requesting immediate clearance for emergency landing at Nelly's. I've got multiple hydraulic failures and approximately 12 minutes of fuel remaining." The voice belonged to a civilian aircraft that had appeared on radar 30 minutes ago, flying a trajectory that should have been impossible for anything but military hardware. Webb frowned at his radar screen. The aircraft's signature was unlike anything in their database, sleek, fast, and completely unidentified. More concerning was its flight path, a perfect approach that demonstrated intimate knowledge of restricted airspace protocols. Whoever was piloting that machine knew exactly where they were going. "Phantom 77, state your credentials and nature of emergency," Webb responded, his finger hovering over the scramble alert button. Standard protocol demanded immediate interception of unknown aircraft, especially those approaching one of America's most classified installations. "Control, I'm declaring a pan-pan emergency. Aircraft is a modified Gulfstream G650 with experimental avionics. I need direct routing to runway 27 left." The pilot's voice carried no trace of panic, despite reporting catastrophic system failures. "And Control, you might want to have someone with actual authority meet me on the ground." Webb's eyes narrowed. The pilot's radio discipline was flawless, using proper aviation phraseology with the confidence of someone who'd spent years in military cockpits. But the aircraft itself remained a mystery, its radar signature shifting subtly as it descended through 20,000 feet. "Phantom 77, we're showing multiple system warnings on your aircraft. Do you require emergency services on standby?" Webb's radar operator looked up from his console, shaking his head. The readings were unlike anything they'd encountered. "Negative on fire and rescue. Control, this bird's coming in clean." The pilot paused, and Webb could hear the subtle whine of engines powering back. "But you might want to call General Morrison. Tell him Echo 7 is coming home." The transmission ended, leaving Webb staring at his screen in confusion. Echo 7 wasn't just any call sign. It belonged to a legend, a pilot who disappeared from active duty 5 years ago after completing missions so classified they existed only in whispered conversations among Pentagon brass. Everyone assumed Echo 7 had retired quietly into civilian life. As the mysterious aircraft continued its approach, Webb realized they were about to discover that some legends never truly fade away. The desert wind carried secrets across the tarmac that afternoon, secrets that would challenge everything the Navy SEALs thought they knew about respect, authority, and the woman who was about to change their understanding of both forever. Kamara Akafer adjusted the throttle with surgical precision, feeling the familiar weight of G-forces press against her shoulders as the modified Gulfstream responded to her commands. 5 years of civilian flying hadn't dulled her instincts. If anything, the freedom from military regulations had sharpened her edge. But today's flight wasn't about personal satisfaction. It was about answering a call that had taken her completely by surprise. The encrypted message had arrived at her Manhattan penthouse at 400 hours, delivered by a courier who'd vanished before her security team could properly identify him. Inside the sealed envelope was a single photograph. Her old squadron patch, the distinctive Black Hawk silhouetted against a red sky, and coordinates that led to restricted Nevada airspace. Below her, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly in all directions, its harsh beauty a stark contrast to the carefully manicured world she'd built for herself. Akafer Technologies had made her one of the youngest female billionaires in America, her innovations in aerospace engineering revolutionizing both civilian and military aviation. But success in the corporate world felt hollow compared to the clarity of purpose she'd once known in military cockpits. Nellie's control, Phantom 77 beginning final approach. Request updated wind conditions and runway status. She kept her voice steady despite the cascade of warning lights illuminating her instrument panel. The hydraulic failures were real enough, sabotage, she suspected, though proving it would require getting this bird safely on the ground first. Phantom 77, winds are 270 at 15 knots, gusting to 22. Runway 27 left is clear and available. Emergency vehicles are standing by. The controller's voice carried a note of professional concern that reminded Kamara of her early days as a flight instructor, when every landing felt like a small victory against physics and fate. She banked left, aligning with the runway centerline while managing the aircraft's increasingly erratic behavior. The modified Gulfstream had been her pet project for 3 years, incorporating experimental fly-by-wire systems that pushed the boundaries of civilian aviation. Most of those systems were now either failing or providing conflicting inputs, forcing her to rely on pure piloting skill. Through her headset, she heard the unmistakable sound of military radio chatter, terse, professional communications that transported her instantly back to carrier decks and combat zones. Someone was coordinating a reception committee, which meant her arrival wasn't as unexpected as she'd assumed. Phantom 77, be advised we have multiple agencies requesting your immediate availability upon landing. Are you prepared for official debriefing? The controller's question carried implications that made Kamara's pulse quicken. She touched the silver wings pinned inside her jacket, a talisman she'd carried through every mission of her military career. Whatever waited for her on the ground, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else, with precision, courage, and the unshakable confidence that came from knowing she'd earned her place in any room. The runway approached steadily, heat waves dancing across its surface like memories of battles fought and won. The Gulfstream touched down with barely a whisper, its modified landing gear absorbing the impact with the kind of engineering precision that made seasoned aircraft mechanics take notice. Kamara felt the familiar satisfaction of a perfect landing, even as hydraulic fluid leaked steadily onto the tarmac behind her. Whatever had caused the system failures, it hadn't been enough to prevent her from demonstrating why Echo 7 had once been considered the finest pilot in the Navy's inventory. As the engines wound down, she could see through her cockpit windows a reception committee that told her more about the seriousness of the situation than any briefing could have conveyed. 3 black SUVs were positioned at precise intervals along the taxiway, their occupants undoubtedly armed and operating under classification levels she could only guess at. But it was the 4th vehicle that caught her attention, a desert tan Humvee bearing the distinctive markings of Naval Special Warfare Command. Navy SEALs didn't typically interest themselves in the affairs of civilian aircraft, which meant someone had decided her unexpected arrival merited their particular brand of attention. Phantom 77, cut engines and remain in your aircraft until cleared by ground personnel. The controller's voice had taken on the formal tone that accompanied security protocols she remembered all too well. Kamara completed her post-flight checklist with automatic precision, her hands moving through the familiar sequence of switches and gauges, while her mind processed the tactical implications of what she was seeing. The coordination was too smooth, too practiced, for this to be an improvised response to an unscheduled civilian arrival. Someone had been expecting her, or at least prepared for the possibility. Through her side window, she watched a figure emerge from the lead SUV, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the controlled aggression that marked special operations personnel. Even at 50 yards, she could see the SEAL trident on his uniform, the distinctive insignia that represented one of the military's most elite communities. The SEAL approached her aircraft with the kind of tactical awareness that suggested he was prepared for anything from a diplomatic meeting to an armed confrontation. His teammates remained positioned near their vehicles, maintaining overwatch positions that covered all possible escape routes from the aircraft. "Ma'am, I'm Commander Jake Rourke, Naval Special Warfare Group 1. I'm going to need you to exit your aircraft slowly, hands visible, and follow my instructions exactly." His voice carried through a portable radio transmitter, professional but tinged with the kind of suspicion reserved for unknowns in restricted airspace. Kamara smiled despite the gravity of the situation. Commander Rourke was following proper security protocols, treating her as a potential threat until proven otherwise. It was exactly what she would have done in his position, which told her that whatever briefing he'd received had been deliberately incomplete. She opened the cockpit door and stepped onto the tarmac, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. The desert heat struck her immediately, a dry intensity that reminded her of deployments to less hospitable corners of the world. Her civilian clothes, tailored business attire that had cost more than most people's monthly salary, felt suddenly out of place in this environment of tactical gear and military efficiency. "Commander," she said, raising her hands to shoulder level while maintaining eye contact, "I believe General Morrison is expecting me." Commander Rourke's expression didn't change, but Kamara caught the subtle shift in his posture that suggested he'd heard something unexpected. The mention of General Morrison, a name that carried considerable weight in special operations circles, had registered, though he was too professional to let it show overtly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification before we can proceed with any conversations about personnel you may or may not know." Rourke gestured toward two of his teammates, who approached with the fluid movement of operators comfortable in their tactical environment. Kamara reached slowly into her jacket, withdrawing a leather credential folder that had remained untouched for 5 years. The military identification card inside bore her photograph, and a rank that made Rourke's eyes widen slightly before his training reasserted control. Colonel Kamara Akafor, United States Navy, retired. She handed him the credentials with the same calm professionalism she'd once used to brief Pentagon officials. "Call sign Echo 7. I believe you'll find my security clearance is still active, Commander." The credentials were authentic. Rourke's training had taught him to recognize the subtle security features that made military identification nearly impossible to forge. But the rank represented something more significant than mere authority. It indicated a career trajectory that few officers achieved, and even fewer maintained while transitioning to civilian success. "Colonel, with respect, I'm going to need to verify this information through official channels." Rourke handed back her identification while signaling his communications specialist. "In the meantime, I'd appreciate your cooperation with standard security procedures." Kamara nodded, understanding the position he was in. "Commander, 5 years ago I held a top-secret SCI clearance with special access programs that I suspect are still classified above your current level. The encrypted message that brought me here today referenced operational details that only 3 people should know. One of them is General Morrison." The desert wind picked up, swirling dust around their feet and carrying the distinctive sound of approaching rotorcraft. A U-60 Black Hawk materialized from the heat haze, its rotor wash creating a miniature sandstorm as it settled onto the tarmac 50 yards away. The helicopter's engines remained spinning as a single figure emerged, an older man whose uniform bore the stars of general officer rank and the weathered bearing of someone who'd spent decades making decisions that affected the lives of others. General Morrison walked toward them with the unhurried confidence of absolute authority. "Stand down, Commander," Morrison called as he approached. "Colonel Akafor is here at my personal request." Rourke maintained his professional demeanor while processing this new information. The general's arrival confirmed that this situation was far above his operational level, but it also raised questions about why a retired Navy colonel warranted such high-level attention. "General, sir," Rourke acknowledged with a sharp salute. "We've secured the aircraft and the area is clear." Morrison returned the salute before turning his attention to Camara, his expression mixing professional respect with something that might have been paternal pride. "Echo 7, it's been too long." "General," she replied, her civilian success seeming to fade into the background as military bearing reasserted itself. "You sent for me." The two words carried the weight of shared history and mutual respect, earned through circumstances that Commander Rourke could only imagine. General Morrison studied Camara with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to assessing both opportunities and threats in the space of a heartbeat. The years since her retirement had been kind to her. Success in the civilian world had added a polish to the warrior he remembered, but he could still see the steel beneath the surface. "Commander Rourke, I need you and your team to establish a security perimeter at 200 meters. What we're about to discuss falls under special access protocols." Morrison's tone carried the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance without explanation. Rourke nodded crisply, though Camara caught the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Understood, sir. My team will maintain overwatch and communication security." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "General, are we expecting additional assets or agencies?" "That depends on the Colonel's answer to my proposition." Morrison waited until the SEALs had moved to their assigned positions before continuing. "Camara, 3 days ago we lost contact with a deep-cover team operating in hostile territory. The last transmission indicated they'd obtained critical intelligence regarding weapons technology that's decades ahead of anything in our current inventory." The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, the only sound coming from the cooling engines of Camara's damaged aircraft and the distant whine of the Black Hawk's rotors. She absorbed this information with the same analytical precision she'd once applied to tactical briefings, already identifying the implications. "You're talking about a rescue operation," she said, though it wasn't quite a question. "Something requiring capabilities that fall outside standard military parameters." Morrison nodded grimly. "The team is being held at a facility that conventional forces can't approach without triggering an international incident. We need someone with your particular skill set, someone who can operate independently, think creatively, and handle experimental aircraft under extreme conditions." Camara glanced toward the modified Gulfstream, its sleek lines marred by the hydraulic fluid that continued to seep onto the tarmac. The sabotage had been subtle but effective, suggesting that someone had wanted to ground her permanently rather than simply delay her arrival. "The hydraulic failures weren't accidental," she observed. "Someone knew about this meeting. Which is why we need to move quickly. The technology our people discovered represents a paradigm shift in aerospace engineering, propulsion systems that could render every fighter aircraft in our inventory obsolete within 5 years." Morrison's expression darkened. "If that intelligence falls into the wrong hands, it won't just change the balance of power. It could eliminate our air superiority permanently." The weight of global implications settled over the conversation like the desert heat itself, inescapable and profound. Camara understood that she was being offered more than just a mission. She was being invited back into a world where her decisions could shape the future of warfare itself. "What makes you think I'm still capable of this kind of operation?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Morrison smiled for the first time since his arrival, the expression transforming his weathered features. "Because Echo 7 never stopped being Echo 7. You just learned how to hide it behind corporate success." The challenge hung in the air between them, as clear and direct as a flight path through enemy territory. The briefing room buried beneath Nelly's Air Force Base felt like stepping back into a previous life. Camara sat across from Morrison, and 2 other officers she didn't recognize, their uniforms bearing insignia that suggested involvement in programs several classification levels above standard military operations. The walls were lined with displays showing satellite imagery and technical specifications that made her engineering background sing with recognition. "The facility is here," Morrison said, indicating a compound hidden in the mountains of a country she couldn't name in mixed company. Heavily defended, sophisticated anti-aircraft systems, and intelligence suggesting they've reverse-engineered technology that shouldn't exist for another 20 years. Colonel Sarah Chen, the intelligence officer, leaned forward with the intensity of someone who'd spent too many hours analyzing data that kept her awake at night. "Our team was investigating reports of test flights involving aircraft with impossible performance characteristics. They managed to infiltrate the facility and confirm that someone has developed propulsion technology that violates our understanding of physics." "Violates our understanding," Kamara repeated carefully, "or exceeds our current capabilities." The third officer, whose name tag read "classified," instead of providing actual identification, answered with the measured tone of someone accustomed to discussing impossibilities. "Colonel Akaffer, the aircraft they've developed can achieve sustained flight at Mach 6 while maintaining the maneuverability of a helicopter. The power-to-weight ratios we're seeing suggest energy sources that exist only in theoretical models." Kamara studied the technical specifications displayed on the wall-mounted screens, her mind automatically calculating the engineering challenges such performance would require. The mathematics were staggering. Achieving those capabilities would demand innovations in materials science, energy generation, and aerodynamics that represented decades of research. "How certain are you about these performance figures?" she asked. "Our team witnessed a demonstration flight. Recorded data confirms aircraft performance that makes our most advanced fighters look like museum pieces." Chen's expression was grim. "The implications for air combat are absolute. If this technology proliferates, American air superiority ends permanently." Morrison activated another display showing the mission parameters. "The rescue window is narrowing. Intelligence suggests our people will be moved to a more secure location within 72 hours. After that, extraction becomes impossible without triggering a full-scale military confrontation. And you need someone who can penetrate their airspace, extract the team, and bring back samples of the technology." Kamara's statement wasn't a question. She understood the tactical requirements even as she recognized the impossibility of the mission. "We need someone who can fly an aircraft that doesn't officially exist, navigate through hostile territory using experimental stealth systems, and complete an extraction under conditions that would challenge our best special operations teams." Morrison's gaze was steady and direct. "We need Echo 7. The room fell silent except for the subtle hum of ventilation systems and classified electronics. Kamara felt the familiar weight of decision that had once defined her military career, the moment when intellectual analysis gave way to instinctive commitment. "Show me the aircraft," she said simply. Morrison smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose calculated gamble had succeeded. "I was hoping you'd say that." The four of them rose from the conference table, and Kamara realized she was about to see technology that would either represent humanity's greatest achievement or its most dangerous mistake. The hangar was a cathedral of advanced engineering, its vast space dominated by an aircraft that challenged every assumption Kamara had ever made about the possibilities of flight. The machine before her seemed to exist at the intersection of art and impossibility, sleek lines that suggested both predatory grace and technological transcendence. "Project Aurora," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the reverence reserved for weapons that could change the nature of warfare itself. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it represents 15 years of research into propulsion technologies that push the boundaries of known physics." Kamara walked slowly around the aircraft, her engineer's eye cataloging details that both thrilled and terrified her. The hull showed no visible seams or joints, as if it had been grown rather than assembled. The propulsion system was completely enclosed, offering no hints about the revolutionary technology that supposedly enabled impossible performance. The power plant utilizes principles we're still trying to understand, the classified officer explained. Energy conversion efficiency approaches theoretical maximums, while generating thrust-to-weight ratios that exceed anything in our inventory by orders of magnitude. "What's the catch?" Kamara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Chen consulted her tablet before responding. Flight characteristics are unlike anything our test pilots have experienced. The aircraft responds to control inputs in ways that challenge conventional piloting techniques. We've had 3 test pilots attempt qualification flights. None achieved operational certification. Because they couldn't adapt to the flight envelope, Kamara observed, or because the aircraft itself is fundamentally unstable. Both, Morrison admitted. The machine requires a level of instinctive integration between pilot and aircraft that goes beyond traditional flying skills. It demands someone who can think three-dimensionally while processing information at superhuman speeds. Kamara approached the cockpit, noting the absence of traditional instruments in favor of holographic displays that seemed to hover in three-dimensional space. The pilot's seat was surrounded by interfaces that suggested direct neural connection rather than mechanical control. "You're talking about a symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and artificial intelligence," she said, understanding flooding through her as she recognized the true nature of the challenge. The aircraft's flight control system incorporates adaptive learning protocols that create a unique interface with each pilot, the classified officer confirmed. Successful operation requires surrendering conventional piloting instincts in favor of intuitive integration with the machine's artificial consciousness. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an advanced aircraft. It was a new form of hybrid intelligence that combined human creativity with machine precision. Flying it would require more than skill. It would demand a fundamental transformation of identity. "How long do I have to learn?" Kamara asked. Morrison checked his watch with the grim precision of someone tracking a countdown toward catastrophe. 18 hours. After that, we launch the mission whether you're ready or not. Kamara nodded, accepting the impossible timeline with the same calm professionalism that had once defined her approach to every challenge. "Then, we'd better get started." As she climbed into the cockpit, she felt the aircraft's systems beginning to respond to her presence, interfaces awakening with an almost organic fluidity that suggested she was no longer simply sitting in a machine, but bonding with a new form of technological life. The transformation from civilian success story back to operational pilot had begun. The first few hours of integration felt like learning to breathe underwater. Kamara sat motionless in the cockpit while the aircraft's artificial intelligence mapped her neural patterns, creating pathways that would allow human intuition to interface directly with machine precision. The process was neither painful nor pleasant, simply profoundly alien. "Biometric readings are stable," Chen reported from the control room, her voice reaching Kamara through speakers that seemed to resonate inside her skull rather than through her ears. "Neural integration is proceeding faster than we've seen with previous test subjects." Through the holographic displays surrounding her, Kamara could see data streams that represented not just aircraft systems but her own physiological responses. Heart rate, brain activity, even the subtle electrical patterns of her nervous system were being incorporated into the machine's decision-making matrix. "The aircraft is learning you." Morrison's voice carried a note of scientific fascination. "Every pilot creates a unique interface signature. The machine adapts its responses to match your instinctive reactions." Kamara felt the truth of his statement as the cockpit environment began to shift subtly around her. Display configurations modified themselves to match her visual preferences, while control surfaces adjusted to accommodate her physical proportions. The aircraft was becoming an extension of her body in ways that conventional flying could never achieve. "Initiating preliminary systems check," she said, her words triggering cascades of information that flowed through her consciousness like liquid light. The aircraft's status wasn't simply displayed. She experienced it directly, feeling the machine's readiness as if it were her own physical condition. The propulsion system hummed with potential energy that she could sense rather than hear. Navigation systems painted three-dimensional maps directly onto her visual cortex, showing not just geographic features but tactical threats, weather patterns, and electromagnetic signatures in real-time integration. "Beginning low-power engine tests," Kamara announced, though the words felt inadequate to describe the symphony of controlled forces awakening around her. The aircraft didn't simply start, it became alive, its consciousness merging with hers until she could no longer distinguish between human intention and machine capability. Through the hangar's reinforced windows, she could see Morrison and his team monitoring her integration, with the focused intensity of scientists observing a phenomenon that challenged their understanding of the possible. Their instruments could measure her vital signs and track the aircraft's responses, but they couldn't experience the profound transformation taking place in the cockpit. "All systems showing green," Chen reported. "Pilot integration at 93% and climbing. That's higher than any previous test." Kamara smiled, feeling the aircraft's approval as a warm sensation that spread through her nervous system. The machine liked her, trusted her, was eager to show her capabilities that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional flight. "Control, requesting permission for hover tests," she said, though part of her consciousness was already anticipating the aircraft's responses to movements she hadn't yet initiated. "Permission granted, Echo 7. Show us what you can do." The aircraft rose from the hangar floor with the fluid grace of a living thing, its impossible propulsion system generating forces that felt like controlled magic. Kamara was no longer flying a machine. She was becoming one with it, her identity expanding to encompass capabilities that transcended human limitations. For the first time in 5 years, she felt complete. The aircraft responded to her thoughts before she could form them into conscious commands, rising through the Nevada sky with an elegance that redefined Kamara's understanding of flight itself. Traditional aircraft pushed through air resistance. Aurora danced with it, using atmospheric forces as partners rather than obstacles. "Altitude 12,000 feet and climbing," she reported, though the information felt redundant. The aircraft's consciousness shared everything with her, not just numerical data, but the qualitative experience of existing in three-dimensional space without the constraints of conventional physics. "Echo 7, we're reading flight characteristics that exceed our modeling parameters." Morrison's voice carried a mixture of professional amazement and strategic excitement. "Your integration rate is unprecedented." Through the aircraft's sensory network, Kamara could perceive the desert landscape below with resolution that surpassed human vision. Every detail was available to her simultaneously: the thermal signatures of ground vehicles, the electromagnetic emissions of military installations, even the subtle gravitational variations that indicated underground facilities. "Beginning tactical maneuvering trials," she announced, initiating a series of movements that would have torn apart conventional aircraft. Aurora responded with fluid precision, executing direction changes that violated accepted principles of inertia and momentum. The machine's artificial intelligence whispered insights directly into her consciousness, explaining the physics behind their impossible dance through three-dimensional space. The propulsion system didn't simply generate thrust. It manipulated fundamental forces in ways that allowed the aircraft to exist partially outside conventional spacetime. "Control, I'm reading atmospheric disturbances consistent with experimental aircraft operations, bearing 270 at approximately 50 miles. The observation came from some deep layer of shared consciousness that processed information faster than human thought. Confirmed, Echo 7. We have multiple unknown aircraft signatures approaching your position. Configuration suggests foreign military origin. The tactical situation crystallized in Kamara's awareness with perfect clarity. Someone had been monitoring their test flights, waiting for precisely this moment to observe Aurora's capabilities. The timing wasn't coincidental. It represented a carefully orchestrated intelligence operation. "Orders control," she asked, though part of her consciousness was already calculating intercept courses and engagement parameters. "Negative on hostile engagement. Your mission is to evade contact and return to base. We cannot risk Aurora falling into foreign hands." The approaching aircraft were closing rapidly, their formation suggesting coordination and hostile intent. Through Aurora's sensors, Kamara could distinguish at least 6 fighters employing advanced stealth characteristics that made them nearly invisible to conventional radar. "Control, they're using technology that matches our own stealth capabilities. Someone has been studying our programs very carefully." The implications were profound and immediate. If foreign intelligence services had developed countermeasures to American stealth technology, the strategic balance of power was shifting in ways that threatened national security. Echo 7. Execute evasive protocols and return to base immediately. Avoid engagement at all costs. Kamara felt Aurora's eagerness to demonstrate its superior capabilities, but professional discipline overrode both human pride and machine enthusiasm. "Understood, control. Beginning evasion maneuvers." The chase that followed would redefine the boundaries of aerial combat, though no official record of it would ever exist. Aurora cut through the atmosphere like liquid mercury, its impossible maneuverability leaving the pursuing aircraft struggling to maintain contact despite their advanced capabilities. Kamara felt their frustration through the machine's sensor network, pilots pushed to their limits by an opponent that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of physics. "Control, pursuing aircraft are maintaining formation despite evasive maneuvers that should have broken contact minutes ago," she reported while executing a direction change that would have killed any human pilot flying conventional aircraft. Their performance characteristics suggest technology comparable to our own. The chase had evolved into a deadly game of three-dimensional chess played at supersonic speeds. Aurora's pursuers were clearly skilled, their coordination indicating extensive training in engaging highly maneuverable targets. But they were still thinking within the boundaries of conventional flight dynamics. Echo 7. Satellite intelligence indicates additional aircraft launching from an unidentified carrier group approximately 200 miles northwest of your position. You have multiple threats converging on your location. Kamara felt Aurora's artificial intelligence processing this information with computer-like precision, while simultaneously interfacing with her human intuition to develop tactical responses that transcended pure logic. The combination was intoxicating, machine efficiency enhanced by human creativity. "Control, I'm going to demonstrate why Aurora was worth 15 years of development." She initiated a maneuver that human pilots had designated impossible, rolling the aircraft through dimensions that existed beyond traditional concepts of up and down. The pursuing fighters fell behind, as Aurora seemed to phase partially out of normal spacetime, its exotic propulsion system manipulating fundamental forces in ways that challenged the observer's understanding of reality itself. For 30 seconds, the aircraft existed in a quantum state that radar couldn't track and human eyes couldn't follow. When Aurora rematerialized in normal space, it was 300 miles from its previous position, having crossed the distance in what conventional physics would consider negative time. The pursuing aircraft were left searching empty sky while their target had effectively teleported beyond their operational range. Control, I'm beginning approach to Nellies. Pursuit has been evaded through non-conventional means. Morrison's response carried a mixture of professional satisfaction and strategic concern. Outstanding work, Echo 7. Your demonstration just confirmed that Aurora represents the most significant advancement in aerospace technology since the development of jet engines. As the Nevada desert spread beneath her, Kamara reflected on the profound implications of what she'd just experienced. The aircraft hadn't simply outperformed its pursuers, it had operated according to physical principles that redefined the possible. The technology their captured team had discovered wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. Control, requesting immediate briefing on mission parameters. If the opposition has developed technology comparable to Aurora, our extraction timeline may be more critical than originally assessed. Agreed, Echo 7. Land immediately and prepare for final mission briefing. Launch window opens in 6 hours. The aircraft touched down with the same impossible grace it had displayed in flight, its landing approach defying traditional concepts of approach angles and touchdown speeds. Kamara felt the machine's satisfaction as its consciousness began to separate from hers, though the connection would never completely disappear. She was no longer simply a pilot. She had become something new, something that existed at the intersection of human intuition and machine intelligence. The final briefing took place in a secured chamber that existed deeper underground than Kamara had imagined possible, its walls lined with displays showing real-time intelligence from the target facility. The assembled team represented the highest levels of military planning, generals, intelligence specialists, and technical advisors whose combined expertise shaped operations that could influence global security. The facility has increased its defensive posture, Chen reported, her analysis painting a picture of escalating hostility. Satellite imagery shows additional anti-aircraft installations and electronic warfare systems that weren't present 72 hours ago. Morrison activated a three-dimensional hologram that revealed the target complex in startling detail. Our captured team is being held in the central building, which is surrounded by experimental aircraft that confirm the intelligence we've received. The technology they've developed represents an existential threat to American air superiority. The holographic display rotated slowly, revealing defensive systems that incorporated principles Kamara recognized from Aurora's own advanced capabilities. Someone had indeed been studying American aerospace development, adapting those innovations for their own strategic purposes. The extraction window has narrowed to 4 hours, the classified officer announced. Intelligence indicates the prisoners will be transferred to a more secure facility at dawn. After that, rescue becomes impossible without triggering international conflict. Kamara studied the mission parameters with the analytical precision that had once made her the Navy's most effective strategic pilot. The tactical challenges were immense, penetrating sophisticated defenses, locating and extracting personnel under hostile conditions, and accomplishing all of it while avoiding engagement with aircraft that possessed capabilities comparable to Aurora. "What's my backup if Aurora's stealth systems are compromised?" she asked. "There is no backup," Morrison replied bluntly. "Aurora represents our most advanced aerospace technology. If it's detected, you'll be facing opposition that matches your capabilities while operating in their territory with their advantages." The weight of absolute commitment settled over the briefing room like desert heat, inescapable and profound. This mission would succeed or fail based entirely on Kamara's ability to integrate with Aurora's artificial intelligence while navigating through hostile territory that contained threats she couldn't fully anticipate. The captured team obtained data storage devices containing complete technical specifications for the propulsion systems we've observed, Chen added. Recovering that intelligence is equally important to extracting our personnel. The information could accelerate our own aerospace development by decades. Kamara nodded, understanding that she was being entrusted with more than a rescue mission. The success or failure of her flight could determine whether America maintained technological superiority or faced obsolescence in the face of revolutionary advances developed by potential adversaries. Final systems check in 30 minutes, Morrison announced. Launch at 300 hours. Flight time to target 4 hours 20 minutes. Extraction window 40 minutes maximum. As the briefing concluded, Kamara felt the familiar calm that had once preceded her most dangerous military operations. The corporate success of her civilian life felt distant and irrelevant. This was what she had been born to do, what all her training and experience had prepared her for. "General," she said as the others filed out of the briefing room, "when this is over, we need to discuss the implications of what we've discovered. This technology changes everything." Morrison's expression was grim with the weight of strategic responsibilities. "I know, Kamara. That's exactly why you're the only person who can fly this mission." Aurora sat waiting in the pre-dawn darkness, its hull reflecting starlight with the subdued gleam of advanced composites that existed beyond conventional material science. Kamara approached the aircraft with the measured steps of a ritual, her consciousness already beginning to merge with the machine's artificial intelligence before she even entered the cockpit. "All systems green," Chen reported from the control center, her voice carrying the professional tension that accompanied missions where failure meant more than personal consequences. "Weather conditions are optimal, and satellite intelligence confirms the target facility remains at current status." The cockpit embraced Cam,